Afternoon, friends. Welcome back to the church. Thank you for being here on such a glorious afternoon. My goodness. We're so happy that you came inside and shared with us. My name is Sheri Pasquarella. I'm the Executive Director here at the church. So happy to see you all here with us today. And I'm going to introduce our incredible speaker, Jill Bialosky. You can clap. And Jill has developed a really beautiful format. There will be small readings interspersed with questions from me. And then at the end of that, we'll open it up to questions from you guys. As I think you all know, Jill is a poet and an author of several books and publications, including the History of a Suicide, which was her first, was a major New York Times bestselling book, memoir about the death of her sister. She's also published her poetry extensively and is also vice president and executive editor at Norton. So, with all of that said, we are pleased to introduce to you The End is the Beginning by Jill Bialosky.
Thank you. Thank you, Sheri. Ooh, okay.
Is that good enough?
Yes, can you hear me? Yeah. Yes, okay. Good.
You're gonna read?
Sure. Well, I'm going to just begin reading the very first pages of the book. And I want to just introduce it quickly to say that I wrote this book, my mother passed away during COVID, the first month of COVID. And if you remember, we were all under restrictions and quarantines. And I wasn't able to go to my mother's I wasn't able to see her when she was dying because I was in New York and she was in Cleveland, and she was suffering from the last stages of Alzheimer's. And the funeral had to be graveside in Cleveland, and of course I couldn't go there because of the 14-day requirements. So I'm just going to begin with this first section about that time. My mother has just died. It's March 29th, 2020, a cold, brutal, late afternoon. No sun, only a white, lifeless sky. We're on Long Island. We left the city for a weekend house 2 weeks ago, and then COVID struck, and with no end in sight to the pandemic, we've been isolating here. I think of Camus' famous opening line in The Stranger. My mother died today, or maybe yesterday, I don't know. I too feel this strange distortion of time. Maybe because of COVID and because not only am I trapped on Long Island, but I'm far away from Cleveland where I grew up, where my mother died and lived all 86 years of her life. Outside, 2 construction workers are demolishing the old deck attached to our house. Everything feels out of whack. Through the window, I watch workers with masks on strip down the floorboards of the deck and, like pallbearers, carry the warped strips of wood to the dumpster. We had planned for a new deck before COVID hit, hired an architect and a contractor, but now with the pandemic blazing, it seems unnecessary and indulgent. There's too much change, but it's too late. It seems blasphemous, preposterous not to be allowed to attend my own mother's funeral, another devastation of COVID. I think of all the others mourning the deaths of their loved ones and not being able to bid them farewell, and it is as if we are travelers together on the river Styx in a weird state of limbo. I fight with myself about whether I can still figure out a way to travel to Cleveland in the first month of a deadly pandemic. David's judgment is less clouded by emotion. I speak to the rabbi on the phone who will preside over the funeral. In Jewish tradition, the body must be buried within 24 hours. This is to give comfort to the soul of the deceased and quicken the journey to the next world. It also allows the mourners to begin the grieving process. He wants it to happen tomorrow. The day of the funeral, I wake up confused, foggy. We've been in lockdown, day 20 or maybe 21. Days blur, rituals are important. I dress for the virtual graveside burial in a black flowing blouse my mother would love, put on the sapphire earring she gave me, lipstick. My mother never left the house without it. David changes from his now that we're in lockdown sweats into a crisp blue button-down shirt and dark khaki pants. Lucas, our son, wears a pullover sweater. In Cleveland, a driver in a sedan arrives to pick up Laura, the only sister in Cleveland. Cindy is in lockdown in Connecticut. We sisters group text, and occasionally Laura snaps us a photo as the car drives through mostly empty roads to Mount Olive Cemetery in the Cleveland suburbs. We switch from text to FaceTime, watching the burial on a 4x7-inch screen. In Cleveland, a pearl gray morning of howling winds. Laura shows off her new sunglasses. We blow kisses. The rabbi conveys to the small gathering that Iris's daughters, Cindy, who lives in Connecticut, and I in New York, have saved many hundreds, maybe thousands of lives by not traveling. I'm not so sure, but nevertheless, I'm briefly comforted. He recites an incantation of prayers and blessings in Hebrew over the relentless wind before he offers a more personal eulogy. Iris Yvonne Bialosky was a loving mother of 4 daughters, he says. He remembers the other central figures in my mother's life. He mentions that she worked in real estate and retail and that she was loved by many, and then abruptly the eulogy concludes. I want more to be done and said for my mother, exactly what I don't know. The end of a life, it's too short. More should be said, but it's COVID and raining and there are no more words. What about my mother's early years before I knew her marriage to my father, the loss of her mother when she was a child, how she was not financially secure or mature enough to take on the care of her daughters, how as a woman coming of age in the early 1950s, she was ill-equipped for what befell her. Suddenly, as the rain is pouring on my roof in New York and on the black umbrellas in Cleveland and slapping the thousands of headstones for all she has endured, my mother feels heroic and noble. Perhaps this is the moment when it occurs to me that I must write about my mother, make my own eulogy, and go on a quest to understand and capture the woman behind the mother who is often so unknowable to me. Motherhood is deep. We all must mourn our mothers. We must travel from the end to the beginning. After the virtual burial, I say the blessing and light the 7-day Shiva candle to begin the mourning period. I retrieved it with gloved hands the day before the Jewish Center kindly left it in a plastic baggie outside on their porch. Later in the day, I take another walk, put in my earphones. I'm listening to the novel Howard's End, Chapter 12. Margaret privately mourns Mrs. Wilcox. A funeral is not death any more than baptism is birth or marriage union. All 3 are the clumsy devices coming now too late, now too early, by which society would register the quick motions of man. The rain has stopped. I look up at the silver of light parting the darkening sky.
Thank you. Very moving. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
So that is the beginning of the book. That is actually the very first few pages of the book. And you touch a little bit upon that there, but when did you actually start writing the book, and how did that come to you?
Well, after my witnessing my mother's funeral graves from the phone of FaceTime, it was just so surreal, and I wrote a piece about that, and the New York Times published it because during COVID, many people were not able to go see their loved ones, and that was really helpful to me to sort of record that surreal time. And then I started writing the first chapter in the book, which is about my own grieving over the loss of my mother. And then it occurred to me, I knew for a long time that I wanted to write about my mother because she led a very, I wanted to preserve a period of history through the narrative of an extraordinary woman and the family she made under extreme circumstances to capture what life was like for a woman of my mother's milieu. And I wanted to capture the challenges that she faced. But for a long time, I didn't know how I would do it. And then when she passed away, I decided, as I said in those pages, that I wanted to make a eulogy of her. And that was the beginning of it.
And how did the structure come to you? The book is told moving its way backwards. In the title of the book, The End is the Beginning, is many things, and it's also quite literal and direct. It informs you what you're going to read. We start with the funeral, and then we end at your mother's early life. So how did you come up with that structure?
Well, as I was working on the book, I was reading T.S. Eliot's poem, Four Quartets, and I was struck by lines in the poem that I use as an epigraph in my book. The lines are, what we call the beginning is often the end, and to make an end is to make a beginning. The end is where we start from. So it occurred to me that telling my mother's story from the end to the beginning would allow the reader to see her slowly coming alive through pivotal periods of her life. And I responded very much to Eliot's statement or sentiment in his long poem that for all of us on our journey through life, the beginning of who we are is always at the end, and the end is always at the beginning. So organically, this structure made sense for me to tell the story this way and to land at the beginning when my mother was first born. And what I realized was that by doing it this way, I was keeping her alive for me. And I love the idea that the last 10 years of her life, she suffered from Alzheimer's, and so many of her cognitive abilities were disappearing. And so, and I do write about those, there are 3 chapters that are about her years when she was first diagnosed with the disease, and then the slow progression, which was very difficult. So my idea was that the reader would come to the book and see how she's slowly disappearing through these cognitive, through losing her cognitive abilities, and then you could see her slowly coming alive from backwards in time. So that was my conceit, and it was challenging, but I'm glad I figured it out.
Yeah, it really works in the book, and we will touch more. So you'll get some of that experience because Jill is going to be reading the segments, and then we'll be reflecting on each of them. Let me ask this question first. How did it feel for you to be writing this?
Well, it important to me to be writing the book as I was writing it. Again, to record, to document, writing as a way of creating immortality. And I always felt that my mother's life deserved a story. And I knew that I couldn't do it when she was alive. So it was there were times when I was writing the book that it was really difficult for me to conjure up particular periods in her life, especially when they were difficult ones that involved grief and loss. But then there was great joy when I remembered and was able to conjure also my mother had a wonderful love of life and beauty and art and flowers. And so it was, I think that the two intersected, and parts of it were harder than others.
Was it part of did it become part of your processing of grief?
I think it was. I think it did become helped me to process her grief of, not being able to be there at the funeral and not really being able to say goodbye to her. So yes, I think it was also as a writer, and I know there's other writers in the room here, that writing has always been a way for me to understand what I don't really understand. And I really did want to also investigate the deep relationship that I had with my mother, because I was raised by a single mother. My father died when I was 2, and there wasn't a day in my life that I can remember that I wasn't thinking about her or worried about her. And, even if I was, not in Cleveland. And so what was that about for me, and how could I try to understand more of it? So I think by writing it helped me.
One of the things that I love about this first part of the book, although there are elements of it throughout, is the use of literary references. And for different people reading this book or any book, there are different ways in that are constructed for you by the author. For me, I particularly enjoyed the references. You touched on T.S. Eliot. One of them that is very heavily called upon is Thomas Mann and the Magic Mountain. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yes. So coincidentally, when my mother was in a care home, when she first had gone into, when she was first diagnosed with dementia and Alzheimer's, she went into a assisted living place called Stone Gardens in Cleveland, and she really loved being there because they had all kinds of activities, and she loved going to the movies. They showed movies at 2 and 7:30, and she liked to call me up and read me the program of what she was going to watch. And she, even though she couldn't remember, her short-term memory was gone basically, and sometimes conversations were difficult, she could still be a part of this group, which she loved, and she even had a couple romances at Stone Garden. And she was the prom queen, which I found quite ironic.
That was the senior prom, which I thought was such a cute thing that you wrote.
But yes, so I forgot the question now.
Oh, I was asking about the Magic Mountain.
Oh, okay. So, but as her illness progressed, and then she had to move into the nursing care facility of the institution, I was listening to the book, the novel, the great novel, The Magic Mountain by Thomas Mann. And in that novel, it's about the characters living in an institution who are suffering from tuberculosis. And they're in a beautiful place in the mountains in Switzerland, and they're being given this lush foods and wines, and and resting periods, and I was contrasting that to what it was like for my mother to be living in a different kind of institution, and how institutional life, there's time sort of stops, or there's this time is controlled by schedules, and of course when you're in a care home, the schedules are so important. And so the Magic Mountain helped me to think about this idea of time, and wanting to protect my mother's dignity as she was losing a lot of her abilities. You know, my mother was a very beautiful woman, and she cared very much about her physical appearance, and she never left the house without lipstick. And I would come to the facility to see her sometimes, and you know, they didn't put a bra on her, and it really upset me. And I write in my book, I did some research about people who have lost their cognitive abilities, that actually the person is still there and the memories are still there. And somehow the Magic Mountain got entwined in my thinking about my mother and institutions, and losing memory, so that all you have is, well, losing, not memory, but the ability to speak, to tell your narrative. And I became quite preoccupied with these ideas as I was writing the book.
Thank you. Shall we continue?
Yes.
Great.
Oh, another section.
Another section.
Okay. I just wanted to read a short section about my mother when she was newly divorced, and this was during, she was born in 1933, and of course, she was raised by her family to be a wife and a mother. She didn't have any training, and she was very popular when she was younger, but really all she wanted at the time that she was 18, 19, 20, and 21 was to fall in love, to have children, and to be a wife and mother. And unfortunately, when she was 25 years old and she had 3 children under the age of 3, my father died suddenly of a heart condition we later found out that he had. So my mother was caught in this period of time where her future was suddenly very different from what she thought it would be. But this section I'm going to read is, and she eventually remarried, and I write about that in the book, but it was a short-lived marriage. And now it is in the 1970s or 80s when my mother is 43 years old and just having gotten divorced, and her children are teenagers. Mom is 43 years old when I come home from my waitressing job, and she's sunning in the small plot of her backyard. Her friend Rhoda is with her, both on lounge chairs, drinking cheap wine, rubbing baby oil on their skin, and using a foil-wrapped reflector to drink in the rays. After all, this is the Aquarius of dark tans. Iris has her hair tied up in a ponytail. Her cheeks are red and oily from the sun, and she's wearing white balm on her lips so they don't crack or burn. She says there are no men, they only want young women. Rhoda is smoking a skinny cigarette. Her long, super thin legs go up to her narrow waist. She's in a 2-piece with the straps hanging down. She says she's given up on finding someone. No more, she says, they just want to be taken care of. Her husband divorced her and married a European model 20 years younger. The women in Iris's circle talk about it, outraged at his behavior. Now Rhoda works in a clothing store and lives in a tiny apartment. Iris has two sets of friends. One is the divorcees, and the other is those who are still married and financially supported by their husbands. Iris is a good friend to all of them. She likes to laugh and listen to other people's stories, and her friends open their hearts to her because no one has suffered more than she has. The Vietnam War is over, Watergate ended, and everyone's distrustful of the government. Long-standing norms begin to relax. Long hair and sex outside of marriage are in fashion. Free love. Iris has a touch of the hippie in her. She's thin and youthful, and sometimes people mistake us for sisters, which thrills her. Macrame curtains slide down the living windows, crafted for her by her sister-in-law. Iris becomes a health freak. All kinds of vitamins, grains, sprouts, and raw nuts line the kitchen shelves. She allows no white bread, no more cookies or bakery treats or Skippy peanut butter, only organic with an inch coat of oil on the top in the house. She smokes a touch of weed now and then from a stash her friend Esther brings home from her from New York. It's the era of going braless, the summer of love.
Such a great passage. I love that. And it's something we'll talk about in a little bit, but how much of the 20th century is encapsulated as a character almost in the book, which is really great. By this point in the book, so when we start out reading it, you are able to share firsthand experience and knowledge. But the time we get to this point in the book, you're reflecting on your mother as a separate being, as a separate person. How were you able to piece together this chronology of her life?
Well, a lot of it, of course, I pieced together through my own memories of my mother, and I had very distinct memories of different periods of time when she was alive. But I also am very cognizant that I'm writing this from a very subjective viewpoint, and that, of course, I could never know everything about my mother's thoughts and feelings, and nobody can ever know that. I was lucky that my mother had since after my father died, my aunts would tell us stories about their life together before we were born. And my mother told me a lot of stories about how she first met my father and how they fell in love. And she also kept these incredible scrapbooks of her era when she was in high school and junior high. And that was a great source of information for me when I get to the chapters in her life when she was younger and really very popular, and her life was just unfolding. And then there's a chapter after that about her living with her. She grew up in a very modest Jewish family. Her father was a bank teller. Her mother was trained to be a teacher, but became took care of her husband and my mother. And you'll find out in the book that and my grandfather was one of 6 siblings, so there were a lot of aunts around the house who really helped take care of my mother when she was little. And they were so poor at that time that they lived in like a house that was divided into 2 homes. So one half was my grandfather's house and the other half was another family, and then they took in a boarder. So I write about this period in her life.
When you were talking about her in her 40s, midlife, it's a little bit not so far removed from your own experiences. How did you reflect upon similarities and differences between your mother's life and your own?
During what period? When she
In the
was,
40s, and the references the time period that you were just reading about, where she's in her 40s.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, that was really such huge social change, right? From the time when, from the 50s and then the 60s. And what was challenging for my mother was that during that period where, as I write about, free love and people were getting divorced and women were trying to find themselves outside of the marriage, outside of the home, my mother was still crippled because she had, she had 3 teenagers, and then she had my other sister, Kimmy, who was born out of her second marriage. So she really didn't have the abilities to recreate a life that some women of that new generation were doing. They were not wanting to rely on men. They wanted to move away from the patriarchy and the sort of patriarchal traditional family. And I just remember that it was very clear in my mother's social world that there were her friends that were divorced, and then her friends that stayed married, and the friends that stayed married became wealthy and had vacations and so-called perfect lawns, perfect homes. And then, my mother and her divorced friends, many of them were living in apartments, and it was just a huge moment of change for women that I wanted to document.
And has shifted a lot for your generation.
Yes, yes.
Where you're more professional. I mean, you have this big career, and that would have been a dream for your mother to have had the life that you've had, really, right?
Yes, I felt that she, she was very creative, and she, when I was writing about when she got married when she was 21 years old, and she went to college for 1 quarter at Ohio State before she got engaged. I just thought, what would have happened if she hadn't gotten married that early and she had completed her education, and what would her life have been? But the gift that she gave her daughters was that we all knew that we wanted to be independent because of her, the way that circumstances made it so difficult for her.
And you guys bore witness to that for most of your lives. Yeah.
Yes.
Also want to touch upon the form of this as a memoir. And it could have taken other forms. This is your second-ish memoir. And I say second-ish because The History of a Suicide and The End of This Beginning, they are classic memoir formats. You have another book that is a work of poetry that's also a memoir. What have you must have learned a lot about writing memoirs. Any insights you can share with us?
Yes, I was telling Sheri that I actually wrote a little piece for Writer's Digest about, and I called it The Messy House of Memoir. And the reason why is because, when you're writing about someone's life, whether it's your own or somebody else's, and in my book it clearly is both, right? You have to decide what am I going to tell, because you can't encapsulate every year, every period. It's not a biography where, biographers start usually from cradle to grave. In memoir writing, you have to choose the kind of the most pivotal moments where you have to kind of create a narrative, and you have to create momentum in the book. So you're really relying on using skills of a novelist to keep the story going. And so the scaffolding, in my opinion, for memoir is very important because that's the structure. So the scaffolding of this house of memoir was the way that I told the story from the backwards in time and selected certain periods. And that helped me to contain some of the I wanted to create a narrative within each chapter so that you could be reading the book as a story. And then that involves also creating place and time and what people are wearing and the whole milieu. And I tackled it sort of chapter by chapter as I went through the process. But I would say that the real point about writing a memoir, and I have a quote about it here from the great Vivian Gornick, who was a big influence. She wrote a memoir called Fierce Attachments about her relationship with her own mother. And she writes, her memoir, Fierce Attachments, Fierce Attachments was a touchstone for me as I was thinking about writing about my own mother. In a piece for Slate, Vivian Gordon writes, "A memoir is a tale taken from life that is from actual, not imagined occurrences, related by a first-person narrator who is undeniably the writer. Beyond these bare requirements, it has the same responsibility as the novel or the short story, to shape a piece of experience so that it moves from a tale of private interest to one with meaning for the disinterested reader." And I really like that phrase, that it must move from a tale of private interest, meaning my personal story, to one that could have meaning for the disinterested reader. So you want to be able to tell your story so that somebody who may be not interested at all in your story will find it interesting.
Which you seem to becoming a master at.
Thank you.
Shall we read a little more?
Sure. So I wanted to read this little section where this is right after my father has died, and my mother is 25 and she has 3 young girls. "We live in a white house with black shutters and a black door. I share a bedroom with Cindy, and Laura has her own room, and our mother now sleeps alone in the master bedroom with a king-sized bed where on one side the ghost of her dead husband resides. There's a wall of white dressers, each with 3 large drawers beneath 2 windows and an attached bathroom with its own dressing room. When we're toddlers, we find it a good hiding place for hide and seek. Downstairs in the living room sprawls a bright yellow rug we name the scrambled egg rug because that is exactly what it looks like. A framed print of Van Gogh's sunflowers is on one easel on one side of the room, and a portrait of one of Modigliani's long-necked women over the mantel. A plant grows to the ceiling in a corner of the living room. It's our own Jack and the Beanstalk. I wish I was Jack with 5 magic beans who had climbed up the stalk to save his mother and had been greeted by the giant. Fee-fi, fo-fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman. I want to find a golden egg to make us rich so our mother won't have to worry. I want to be by my mother's side always. If I'm with her, I know she will not fall apart. I love when we drive in the car and I claim the front seat and can lay my head on her lap while she's driving and she strokes my hair. I notice everything about her. For instance, how she lifts her hands on the steering wheel to admire her manicure or stretches her neck when we are stopped at a traffic light to see into the rearview mirror and dabs fresh lipstick on her lips. I love everything about her. She's so warm and sweet to us when she's not afraid. When I'm homesick, it's the best day of my life. I'm allowed to sleep in her king-sized bed, and she makes me tomato and butter sandwiches on white bread, and we watch TV, and I get my mother all to myself. I want to grow up to be just like her. She has long tan legs and long slim arms and big brown eyes that get misty with emotion. I'm so proud when she comes to our school assemblies and I see her in the front rows with the other parents, and I think I have the prettiest mother of all my friends. At night, she tucks us in bed and covers me with the scratchy, burnt red blanket and kisses my forehead. Even though our father's ghost lives in our house, when we are all together, there are days when I don't long for more. And then I just want to read a short passage about her dating life that began. Iris's aunts and father encourage her to marry, again, hopefully to a Jewish man who can offer her stability in exchange for her taking care of the home and the children. Mom's married friends and sister-in-laws fix Iris up on dates. It's like a new career, this dating life. Iris must manage it perfectly. She spends her mornings in bed, sometimes recovering from a late night out, her afternoon shopping, then making dinner for us. Sometimes it's Stouffer's frozen food or TV dinners, and if time is on her side, Sloppy Joe's tuna noodle casserole or wiener goulash. After dinner, we trudge upstairs and watch our mother prepare for one of her dates. It could take hours, collapsed on her bed, watching Gilligan's Island. Which one of us wants to be Ginger or Mary Ann? Iris turns her bedroom and bath into a beauty salon or fashion show. Rollers are everywhere, hair dryers, drawers full of makeup and lipsticks, not to mention perfumes and fancy lingerie, high-heeled shoes stacked in neat little rows in her walk-in closet. I watch her try on outfit after outfit and look at herself scrupulously in the mirror. One can't help but admire the perfectionism she puts into caring for her expensive clothes, her lacy double-cup bras, sheer pantyhose and panties she washes by hand and are always drying on a rack in her bedroom. This is the era where Marilyn Monroe and Jane Mansfield served as the epitome of beauty. We sisters sort of enjoy the dress-up show until we don't, and certainly Iris deserves the fun and enjoyment of going out and having fun and being desired. But she takes too long getting ready, and when the date rings the doorbell, she shoos us downstairs and makes us greet him. Sometimes she lets the date wait a good half hour. Is this intentional? And we're forced to entertain. We can't help but admire how dazzling she looks when she finally walks down the stairs for her entrance, as if she's an actress on the red carpet. Still, there are nights when I don't want her to go out. I look out the window and follow the date, escorting Iris into his car and shutting her inside. As the car eventually pulls out of the driveway, the sky is already dark. We slowly understand that the dates signify that Iris is hunting for a husband and a father for us. She's like Cinderella awaiting for the prince with the right slipper to fit.
Well, there's a lot in that passage. It's so charming. And I think that one of the things that makes it charming, which is this depiction of post-war America with the references to popular culture, the specific names of products, it's almost a world bygone. Can you discuss a little bit this vivid, these wonderful depictions of place as well as the detail of products and experiences that then form your choices in this book, yes, and your memories, the relationship between memory and product?
Yes, well, that's also part of the messy house of writing memoir, is that you have to, conjure the time and the place and what was happening. And those memories are very vivid for me when my mother was getting ready for her dates and me and my sisters were on her bed and watching Patty Duke and Gilligan's Island and all those shows. And when I write about the era when my mother was a young woman, teenager in the 50s, that was really fun because it was the beginning of rock and roll, and she went to these movies. She saved her tickets for all of her movies in the scrapbook, so I knew which movie she went to, and was able to, and she saved, her corsages from her dates, and she was in sororities, and she was in clubs, and the writing club, the science club. So I had a lot of material to work with in order to make, in essence, when you're writing memoir, you're creating a character. Yes, this is my mother through my eyes, right? But I'm also using, some craft, to create a character. You have to give them life, and through giving a character life, you have to imagine what they're wearing and how they smell and touch and all of those senses to bring them alive. Yeah.
You do so effectively.
Thank you.
Also at this point in the book, there's the trend of grief and loss that keeps emerging, because as you open with this very lighthearted passage, which in some ways is evocative of the complexity of grieving, because as you describe at one point, there are these waves of grief, and that other times life is going on. Presumably your mother is still grieving the death of your father, while she's also trying to, as you said, catch a new man and create a new life for you and your sisters. But grief becomes a repeated motif, if you will, in the book. And can you speak a little bit about your mother's grief at this point coalescing with your own, with the story of your own grief and loss is now, at this point in the book, a major recurrent motif in the book?
Yeah, that's true. I think that, Sheri, you said earlier when we were speaking that the book opens with my mother's death, and that it ends with the death of my mother's own mother. And I tell that story in a chapter that when my mother was 8 or 9, she was very close with her mother. She was the only child at that time, and her mother, they wanted to have another child, and my mother's mother got pregnant again, and this was during, she got scarlet fever, and this was a time when it was rampant and people were being quarantined, and there was no antibiotics. So this lovely woman, who would have been my grandmother, who I never knew, my mother's mother, died giving birth to her brother. The brother survived the birth, my mother's brother, but her mother did not. And so when I wrote that chapter, I really felt how powerful that was for my mother to lose her mother when she was only 8 or 9 years old. And that's when, and she was left with her father, my grandfather, Eugene Greenbaum, and then the aunts that came in and helped her. But yes, it was, I recognized that the fact that she lost her mother so young was such a important part of who she was and informed her life. And I also recognized at the same time that for me, losing my father at 2, in a way, my mother and I both lost a parent at young ages. So there was that connection that we had.
It's a deep connection, very deep. Just looking over should we go on should we do one more section of reading in the interest of time? And
Yes.
then, is that good?
Yeah, I want to just read the one section where she meets my father.
Okay, great.
That's a good section.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Surely Iris knows or has heard about Milt Bialosky since they both attended the same high school when her friend Irene, later to be her sister-in-law, sets her up with her brother. Iris is 18 and Milt is in his early 20s. He was the star athlete and quarterback of their high school football team and later played football for Miami University in Ohio. They double with Irene and her boyfriend Dick, while Milt's home from college on a break and Iris is a senior in high school. Milt is 5 years older than Iris, tall, broad-shouldered, bright and solid, and though Iris is tentative, she feels what she's never quite felt before with any other boy she's dated, a sense of safety when she folds into his arms. What words pass between them? Maybe Milt talks about the real estate business he plans to start. Maybe they share secrets of their past, their families, their friends, as Milt looks at Iris with his brown eyes with sprinkles of gold that twinkle when he smiles, sending butterflies through Iris's stomach. We can only imagine the chemistry between the motherless daughter and the first son of Jewish immigrants, Iris and Milt, both raised in the shadow of fear, versed in the history passed down to them, instilled in them, never to stand out, protect one's own, family comes first, the silent knowledge lived and felt in the hinterland of silence, never to be talked about or discussed, Kanahora, lest it happens again. Iris attends Ohio State for a quarter and Milt visits her on weekends. Another weekend, Iris comes home to visit her family, but really she just wants to see Milt. No, he can't wait any longer. It's too hard to be away from Iris when she is all he can think about. He's fallen in love with her modesty and polite manners, her femininity and warmth, how easily she laughs, unabashedly, even when he's being corny, how everyone seems to like her. I can't believe he chose me, Iris will tell me again and again. He has made up his mind. Milt kneels on the floor before Iris, who is sitting on the thread-worn couch, the leftover smell of the evening's roasted chicken coming from the kitchen. Let's imagine it's snowing outside and they're in Iris's living room, her relatives giving the young lover some privacy. Milt's in wool trousers, a sports jacket, and loafers with his hair swept back in a pompadour like a movie star. Iris is in a skirt flowing between her knees and ankles, a lacy blouse and cardigan, bobby socks and loafers. Will you marry me, Milt says, and slips a rectangular diamond ring that catches the light and sparkles on Iris's slender finger. Of course, she says with a little laugh. They embrace, they are completely absorbed in each other, in the moment, in the absolute silence in the house. Can they even hear the gusts of the wind and the snow slapping the windows? It's the most monumental event in their young lives, and they both want it to last forever, to hold back anything that might come between them. For a minute, Iris thinks it can't be true. She looks into Milt's damp eyes, then at the ring shining on her finger, the same diamond set in platinum she will admire for the next 70 years.
So sweet. This seems like the moment of greatest happiness from your mother. Is that correct?
Yes.
And what was that like for you to think about this joyous time in your mother's life?
I really loved writing that chapter. When they go on their honeymoon and then they have the babies one after another, and Yeah, it was a really magical time for my mother.
Was this pieced together from her journals or from stories they shared? How did you arrive at all? It's so lush.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I really had to imagine some of it, but I knew my mother so well. I felt the love, and anytime anybody who knew my father met me, they would tear up and say that he was just such a great man and how lucky my mother was to have had him. And my mother really did feel that this is something else that I learned writing the book, that even if you're only with somebody for 5 or 6 years, it can sustain you for a lifetime. Because she really never was able to find anybody that ever lived up to who he was.
That's profound.
Yeah.
Do you want to do the very last section? You want to do one more reading?
I'm seeing a no back there from David.
David. I haven't heard about David since the beginning of the book.
Oh, I'm being funny, but
That's
no, maybe
funny.
we should. Maybe we've had enough.
Well, I think that one thing that we want to talk about.
Or I could read one page.
Read one page from the
One
very
page
back,
from
because
the
there was
very
one
last, yeah.
important point that you and I touched upon. We're talking privately that I would love to share with the group, and then we can open it up to further questions. That's very funny.
This is when she's a teenager. Every morning offers the possibility of hope. Is it fate or chance who one meets, who one becomes? Iris, 16, upstairs in her room, fastening her navy skirt that flows between her knee and her ankles, buttoning a red cardigan sweater with pearl buttons straining to open, pulling up her white bobby socks, slipping into loafers. She combs her hair cut like Joan of Arc and admires her figure in the mirror, grabs her satchel of books, climbs downstairs to the kitchen that smells of coffee and toast and scrambled eggs. There's the Greenbaum family around the aluminum breakfast table with olive-padded aluminum chairs that scrape the linoleum-tiled floor. Good morning, Daddy, Iris says and kisses her father on the cheek. He's dressed in his suit. Today it's the blue one. He only has 2, and the other is brown. He switches from one suit to the other throughout the work week. Now you can hear the ruffle of the Cleveland Plain dealer he neatly folds as he reads it. On the front page is news about the signing of the NATO treaty. It's the beginning of the Cold War, and there's threat of Soviet aggression. I'm just going to skip over a few pages. Once Iris closes the door of the brick family house with white shutters, where she lives with her father, brother Larry, grandmother, a rotating set of aunts, and a boarder named Max on the 3rd floor, she's able to let go of the utterly bewildering, smothering weight of it all, sip in the spring air, and breathe again to life. The sky is gray. She can feel the dampness on her skin, and somehow the just blossoming trees in their greenery spring hope. When the bus arrives, its doors squeaking open, she climbs the steps and is swung into another world. There's Millie and Irene and Sandra. She scoots in next to Sandra. They're gossiping about some of the boys in their brother's frat, how one wanted to go to second base when they were at the cinema. Iris blushes. She's a member of numerous clubs and societies and seems, at least from what she posts in her scrapbook, to be on top of the world. She's popular and likable. What is it that attracts others to her? It's more than her slim figure and wide smile. Maybe it's that cloud of sadness she tries to hide. She exudes a craving for openness, the ability to laugh and feel joy, and an intimate and empathetic knowledge of other people's needs. She never has a bad word to say about anyone. She's aware of other people's suffering. There is a girl in her class who has a terrible stutter she's befriended. Sometimes it takes more than a few minutes for a sentence to emerge, and her classmates are not as patient as Iris. Iris claims her as one of her best friends. She believes in kindness to all and the innocence of love, and is always quick to put herself second. No, she's not a top student, shies away from the terrible world of competition among her peers, of constantly measuring herself against others. She's not loud or a show-off like some of her classmates. She's modest and wants to be liked. What is fun if not an escape? What is joy but the flip side of misery?
That is a great.
Thank you.
Thank you. By the way, Jill will be signing copies of the book. If the woman wanted to leave hers to be signed, she can. I don't know if she heard me. This is a really beautiful moment. We were talking about this idea of the book begins with you describing your loss of your mother. It ends with, as you noted, it ends with you describing her loss of her mother. And along the way, we developed this picture of who your mother was and what you think she offered to others, which I think is aptly said in this passage, which you describe her empathy, the comfort that she offered others. And I felt, and I shared this with Jill, that this is also the sense of reading the book, is that Jill is actually providing a sense of comfort and empathy to others in sharing her experience of grief and her connection with the maternal figure in her life, her mother, and that in exploring her mother with such nuance, she's creating a sense of comfort for the reader who might be dealing with their own loss. So thank you, Jill, for that experience as a reader.
Thank you. Thank you.
Is there anything else you want to reflect upon with that before we open up to questions?
No, I think that's a beautiful way of ending the conversation, because I do hope that, as I said to Sheri, that when you write a book like this, you hope that the reader will be able to enter the story and feel some of his or her own emotions and experiences through the way that I've written about them. And, we all have mothers, whether they're difficult mothers or wonderful mothers or complicated mothers, but there's such a deepness to that connection, whether it's filled with angst or beauty, or both.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
It's well said. And poignant for Mother's Day. Questions? Anybody? Questions from our audience? Yes, Phil.
It's very beautiful. It's very moving, and I can't even imagine taking something like that on. What was the most difficult thing in particular for you to imagine about your relationship with her?
Well, thank you, Phil. I think what was most difficult in writing the book was for me giving myself permission to be as honest as I could as I was writing the book. I think that's one of the important, also in the piece that I wrote about writing memoir, it's really up to the writer to really be as honest as possible so that the real truth can be seen, so it's not sugar-coated, right? So there are parts in the book that, I think the reader can feel the young Jill's frustration with her mother at points. And, so those were difficult parts to write about. But I don't know. At the end of it all, it was all difficult, really. Writing is difficult, as you know. You're exposing a lot of personal material, and you want to do it as artfully as possible. And it's it's a process. It takes a lot of time, a lot of drafts.
How long did it take to write this book?
I would say like, let's see, 3 years, and then I was still editing it with my editor in the last year. Yeah.
Wow. It's a long process.
Yeah.
We had another question here. Miss? Yeah?
I was just wondering if you... Hi. This was beautiful.
Thank you.
And I was wondering if you consulted with your sisters about their memories and kind of put that in.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for asking that question. I did. They were so supportive, which was so great. Yeah, I would be sometimes texting them, do you remember what this happened with Mom when? Do you remember where we were when this happened? And they also shared there's a photo insert in the book too, which, so they were helping me to find the right photos to include, and were very supportive of the book. And yeah, one sister would remember one thing and then it would open my own memory. So I was lucky.
Did you ever have conflicting memories?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. I think that sometimes I would remember something that they didn't remember at all, or they would share something with me that I had forgotten. So, and you know, one sister has already read the book, and she was really happy with it. And my other sister hasn't read it, but it's been very supportive. So I'm lucky. I worried about that. I really wanted them to be on board. And they do see it as that I'm honoring my mother.
Has your son read it? You talked in the beginning of the book about your son's connection with your mother, and that, yeah.
No, he hasn't read it now, but I'm sure he will. Yeah, I'm sure he will.
It just came out, by the way. You guys are hot off the press.
Yeah.
Any further questions? Yeah, Camille?
Hi, thank you. It was really so enrapturing as you just go delve into who she is. I was wondering, so when you're going back and you're writing in the present tense, I love that choice. Like you want to say, and she wore this, and everything is present. Was that a conscious choice? Like, did you start to maybe put it all in the, what's the term? I'm sorry.
The first person. Yes, I did.
I mean, not the first person, but also the tense of what the past tense, like when you're actually going back and telling the stories. Because forgive me, I came in late, but when you started with her funeral, was that also in the present tense?
Yes, I believe
so
it is.
Was this a choice, like with your writing, that you always do? Because it really puts the reader right there in every detail and every scene.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I did choose to do it that way because I wanted that sense of immediacy for the reader, and it helped me as a writer to feel the immediacy of it.
Good question. Thank you. Oh, do we have another one? Yeah, please.
Thank you. Hi, Jill. I love the book.
Oh, hi,
so
Nora.
happy I was able to come.
Oh, I am too.
So my question is, while writing about your mother, did you uncover anything that you didn't know? And did you write about it, or did you keep it, or was it anything? And you don't have to answer.
No, those are good questions. That's a very good question. One thing I uncovered from talking to one of my aunt's sister of my father was that I did not know that my father had not rheumatoid arthritis, a disease, rheumatic fever when he was a child, and that his mother was always worried about him because it can affect the heart. And so, and my aunt told me that that my father's father didn't want him to play sports because she was very worried that something would happen with his heart. And I didn't know that until recently, during writing the book. And it made me wonder, did he know that he was at risk? And did my mother know he was at risk? So that was one kind of secret that I didn't know about, which surprised me. Made me think a lot about the choice. My guess is that maybe he didn't think it was that serious because he was so athletic and healthy.
How old was he when he died again?
30.
Yes, so young.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah. I'll show you one photo from the book because he was quite handsome. But I love this photo.
Your wedding photo.
Yeah, this one with his athletic jersey. Yeah.
Any other questions? Yeah. Oh, there's one there and one here as well.
Hi, thank you so much. It's really beautiful. I'm just wondering if you would be willing to talk a little bit about your process, like how you write and how you have the discipline and so forth, and sort of even where you write, like if you have a place in your house or.
Yeah, I am a very disciplined writer because I have a full-time job. So over the years, I've learned how to write very, early in the morning if I can. That's my favorite time to write before the day crashes in. And if I could get an hour or two before I have to go to work, that's great. I really like that. And I also work on the weekends a lot on my writing. And when I have a draft, I sometimes go to a residency for a week or two where I can really have the whole time to hone in. I can write practically anywhere, but dining room table, and that's probably where I did most of my writing when I was living in New York City. Now we have a house out here, and I'm using my son's bedroom right now as my study. Yeah.
Very powerful. I'm not one to get choked up so quickly, but invariably you find yourself getting there. And your skill set, I'm not a writer, as you know, to be able to set that stage that you talked about, the time period, the clothing, the smell of the burnt toast, carpet like an omelet, you really feel like you're there. But to see that one particular part where she's dating and how in detail you describe the equipment she needs to go get out there and hunt for a man, your capacity to do this, and then when we're asking you and you're discussing it, you still remain very personal. But with Phil being here and you guys are writers, tell us more about this extraordinary technique, because you were able to get us there multiple times. It's an extraordinary technique.
Yeah, that's a hard question, Roni, because Roni is my longtime friend, and he's a cardiologist, and I would like to ask you how you do what you do. But I really think that for me, writing began with poetry. I took, when I was in college, I took a poetry workshop. That's how I first started writing through poetry. And when I was learning the craft of poetry, you really have to, details and imagery and what to say and what not to say, and the rhythms of rhythm and syntax all play into the creation of a poem. And I think that early training of using the senses, and you have to be highly aware as an individual to just pick up things in life and take notes or whatever. But I think it's an accumulation of, I like to think of my writing as kind of a practice. It's like yoga. Like when you go to yoga, maybe each time you might make the pose a little different and it changes the pose, like you turn your hand differently. And I think writing is like that. It's just a process that if you do it long enough, you get better at it. And you have a little bit more control over it. Yeah, it's hard to describe.
Star?
I just want to say beautiful passages that couldn't have been written in prose, so especially in the opening without poetry, they had sort of has the underside of someone very familiar with poetry, so it's sort of like poetic prose, especially when you describe the sky and Cleveland. And I just want to congratulate you for yet another Pulitzer Prize-winning poet that you edited. And Phil is here, and Marie Howe just won the Pulitzer. And I just wanted to ask you, because you yourself go to an editor, if you could talk about, just briefly, what it is that you look for in an editor, how an editor is so vital to the final process of the book.
Well, I think the editor is really like the first trusted reader of a project. And I think what I look for in an editor is just somebody who connects to what I'm doing and what I want, the intention of what I'm trying to do, and can offer insights and ask good questions during the revision process. And an editor does a lot for a book. They have to write the copy, they have to liaison with the art department, with the other departments. So it's really a partnership with an author. And I think that's what, I think, writers need editors. Even though I'm an editor, I need editors. I can't edit my own material without an editor. So, yeah, it's a partnership.
Yep. Question in the back.
Well, first, I just want to say I came tonight because I started to read about what was going on, and I think our mothers were separated at birth. So all I could hear is her looking at me and my sister going, "You're going to put lipstick on, aren't you?" So, but I was wondering, from your youngest sister, whose father, I guess, was your stepfather, were her views of your mother any different because she didn't go through a lot of that hunt for the husband and impact that your mom had it when she was younger?
Right. Well, I think that my younger sister, Kimmy, she, I think what was great for her was that, so the three older ones, we were like teenagers when she was little, so my mother could give her more attention than she could give the three of us. So I think that they had a very close bond. And my mother did do some dating after when my little sister was around, and I mean, all of us sisters talked about it, kind of rolled our eyes at times and hoped, but it wasn't looking good. It wasn't easy out there. And I'm sure it wasn't easy when, she had 4 daughters. Yeah.
Thank you, Jill.
Yes,
thank you,
thank you.
audience.